January 18. We have a quorum. All of our members are here tonight. Item 2 is adjustments to the agenda. One adjustment that we do need to make here is we need to elect a vice chair tonight. Assuming there's no other adjustments to the agenda.
Should we do that at the end?
No, we can't do that at the end. I have to recuse from one of these applications, so
Oh.
we need a vice chair to chair that part of the meeting.
Oh, look at you, John.
I would nominate Barb.
Um,
Strongly. This can just be a vice chair for the meeting, if not for,
oh, vice chair for the day.
Yeah.
Okay.
or at least we can have it settled at another time, but that. We should have the vice chair determined since Jeff stepped down in December and.
Right. Never been on a planning board before.
Second meeting.
All right, I'll do it for tonight and we can discuss it further later. All right. Do you have to vote on that?
Right, so we need to vote on this, right? You want to nominate yourself? I'll nominate Barbara Boardman to be the vice chair for this meeting.
I'll second it.
I'll third it. Okay,
All in favor? All right.
thanks, guys.
Item 3 is citizen comments. Any comments tonight that are not related to one of the 2 applications that we are reviewing? Okay. So pre-applications, number 1 is the solar farm at 489 Mangtown Road.
Good evening. My name is Alex Roberts-Prell with Revision Energy. This is, like you said, just the first pre-application to introduce some of the project facts and still in planning before a formal submission over the next couple of months. So Revision Energy, local to the Montville and South Portland areas, we do everything from residential solar up to about this scale of solar farm. This project is planned at map, it's R14 lot 44, approximately 489 Minktown Road. That's the DOT speculative address. I think you all have a approximate project site plan in front of you. So the project is just under 1 megawatt AC for the nameplate capacity. Which equates to within the fence, just over 4 acres with the clearing limits, which are not yet shown, but will be on the final site plan. It'll be about 6 acres for the entire project. It's been sited at the back of the Waldoboro side of the town line. The landowner owns the abutting lot over the line in Warren, but it's been put as far back from the road and any of the abutting residential properties as possible. So even with the clearing limits, it'll have maintained probably a minimum of 50 to 75 feet of natural vegetation to the field, between the field and Minktown Road, to keep it out of the public view from the road. And then I think the nearest abutting lot line to the residents along Minktown Road is about 400-ish feet, how we have it sited right now. So primary siting goal is to keep it as out of sight as possible from both the landowner's residential property, which is right there, as well as the right of way on Minktown Road. The project is approved by CMP to interconnect on Minktown Road at the Minktown Road substation, which is just down by the high school. As this is a pre-application conference, I'm happy to take notes from the board just as to meeting the ordinances. I've reviewed both the site plan ordinance, performance standards, and solar ordinance. I don't have too many specific questions, but would welcome project specific questions, notes or recommendations based on your past experience with other projects or anything else from public.
Great, thanks. Comments from the board?
I have a quick question. What are the basic standards or criteria that you look for in deciding what piece of land to buy or to put a solar farm on?
Yeah, good question. And I can clarify, this land will not be purchased. It's currently under an option to lease. So assuming all of the approvals are in place and there's nothing detrimental to the project, which at this point, everything's good, interconnection being the big one. So the land will be leased under a ground lease format from the landowner. The basic provisions are decently close to a substation and three-phase power. This one will upgrade the three-phase up Minktown Road, less than a quarter of a mile, so pretty close. Substation capacity is a big confining point. I think the Waldeboro substation, for example, is pretty much maxed out at this point. That wouldn't be a good candidate for a new project. The Minktown Road substation, we're the only project on there. And then in terms of natural resources, confining, like other developments, once you're looking at an actual area based on utility infrastructure, working around actual site development. So I think I included also the wetland map on there for you, which is not overlaid, but again, we've cited the actual structures on the property, so there won't be any wetland impacts. You can imagine if you were looking at 10 acres of land and you had 10 acres of wetlands, it would be a poor candidate for construction, like other developments. Does that answer your question?
So I have three questions. This site plan with the wetlands, is the yellow supposed to be the fence? The yellow line?
That will be approximately the fence. That's to give a rough idea. There won't be any clearing inside of the wetland, and all of the structure will be outside of the wetland. So, for example, there's no NERPA or DEP permits for environmental impacts. Everything's outside of both the wetland and then the stream setback, as well as the setback from this vernal pool. So that will all be shown for the final site plan, which is
And
worked on
this
right now.
is the site, is it sloping? Is it flattish or? what?
It's fairly flat, generally sloping away from Minktown Road. So it'll be, if you're standing on Minktown Road, it would generally be sloping downward. So everything generally falls below, if you were looking up at a cleared area above a tree line, it would be more visible.
Right.
This falls away, like down this field and then to the road. So
Okay. And one other question, you described the fence as an agricultural style fencing.
Yeah.
What the heck does that mean?
yeah, and I can go back to
Is that a chain link fence?
No, so as opposed to a standard chain link fence, it would be more of a open square grid kind of a style. It's what the DP now is recommending for solar installations. So it's not,
So a hog fence.
not a chain
kind of
link.
thing?
yeah,
Hog
it's like a
panel?
heavy gauge open squares. The goal is to
It's
allow
still
like,
off the ground a little bit for animals and all that stuff.
yeah, exactly. Yep. To allow small ground animals and birds to go through comfortably and try to keep deer and larger.
And
Yes.
8 feet tall?
It would be 7 feet for this size project. And like no barbed wire or anything like that.
Alex, it says the rows of panels would be electronically connected via an underground conduit. I mean,
Yes.
do you get in there and start digging up?
Yeah, so it's
Land.
essentially, each row is made up of strings of modules. And then, so everything on the module side is DC power. They're all connected by underground conduit kind of at the end of each row, which will go right along that access road. And that all runs down to the combiners and inverters. So all the on-site wiring, the back of each module has a wire on it. Each module connects to one another. And then those strings go through a conduit down. So during the construction phase,
Yeah.
there'd be a single trench along probably the access road right near there where all that conduit stays underground.
And you don't have to add any more poles or anything like that, or do you?
No, the only poles are shown right at Minktown Road, which interconnects to the above ground power that's there. So it's usually CMP has a couple of poles with their protective devices and the metering, and then the project owns a couple of poles with redundant protective devices, and then we'll go underground through the field along the road to keep everything else underground after that. So we'd only use the minimum amount of poles necessary to interconnect with CMP.
How are these units anchored to the ground, or are they not? They just float on the surface?
The modules?
Yeah.
So the modules will be connected to lateral racking systems. It's aluminum and steel. It's all fixed tilt. There's no tracking or motion. And then the purlins of the racking system, it's fixed tilt, so it just sits there. And then the foundations are what are called earth screws. It's like a 3-inch diameter screw. And so those are the foundations that are advanced in. And then it's all just fixed and attached. Those are the foundations. So that's how the racking would look. It's, 2 rows of screws with then horizontal purlins, and then the modules are affixed to that in kind of 2 rows. So the leading edge, the low edge is about 3 feet off grade, and the high edge is about 10 to 12 feet off grade.
And how much excavation is necessary, or cutting
It's
down,
like work
obviously you're
graded.
cutting down some of the vegetation there, and you're gonna do what?
Yeah,
it requires stumping and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, within the fence line is stumped, and that mostly is so once you go back and revegetate everything, and then go into your just site operation vegetative management, which is really just mowing a couple of times a year and any repairs or anything like that, preventative maintenance. The stumps are removed and revegetated through like the erosion control plan. In terms of site grading, the racking system can be built on like 25 and 30% grade, and there are no grades that high within the site area. So grading is really limited to the access road, which is shown on the west side of the array, and that'll probably will extend from what's shown on there just to the top edge, just so you have access to the inner row spaces. And then with any stormwater controls, which are being designed right now just to mitigate any unnecessary erosion. So there'll probably be a swale on the inside of the road, and then potentially one detention basin. But the actual site itself, it's pretty minimal once it's revegetated. So it won't be stripped and flattened and no topsoil removed and things like that.
And you don't use any chemical defoliants?
Say again, sorry.
You don't use any chemical defoliants at any point in
No.
this operation?
No, once it's revegetated, it's really just once the construction phase is done, it's reseeded. And we usually use kind of a pollinator friendly grass seed mix. And then it's just mowing for vegetative maintenance. So no pesticides, herbicides.
What's your lease period? What's the contract length of time?
Yep, the lease will be for 25 years with 2 5-year extension options at the back end.
Have you taken apart a solar array yet?
No, they're all still in operation. So that,
Unscrewing all those screws is gonna be interesting.
yeah, the screws actually come out quite a bit easier than the driven piles. So that is, a small advantage. The driven piles are a little bit trickier. These just have large threads, so they do thread in and then thread out decently well. And the project will have so it'll have a decommissioning permit with the DEP, and then obviously it'll have the decommissioning plan through the town.
So who owns this? Who's the owner of the project?
Right now, it is slated to be owned by Revision through our residential community solar farm program. That is not finalized, but that is our plan. So it is unlikely to go to a third party financing or investor. Our current plan is to keep it for our residential community solar farm program.
I may be getting ahead of myself, but do the good folks of Waldeboro get any benefit from this as far as electricity?
The electricity portion, the offtake of it will be, the actual electricity goes back onto the grid. The benefit financially is based on the net energy billing program. So bill credits,
Right.
because it's right now planned to be a residential community solar farm, whatever residential CMP customers are buying an ownership in the farm, which gets the credit to their bills as well as they're owning a stake in, it's like if you own a
And
share.
there, is this pool going through CMP or going through Revision?
Say again, sorry.
The people who are going to be benefiting from the solar, do they go through CMP to sign up or through Revision?
Through Revision. So the power is still delivered by CMP. the community solar farm shares are owned through kind of a consortium, which is through a revision sales program, which is not my wheelhouse. So I'd have to, I can take specific questions of that, but
But it's specifically for residential, not for businesses.
that's the plan right now. Yeah.
So getting back to your point about the ownership, which is an interesting point. So how many of these projects have you sold to a third party?
Like farms of this size.
Yeah,
We've done probably a dozen-ish projects that have been built around Maine, and I think a little over half are residential solar farms. And then the other half have been done in partnership with financial companies or other investors that Revision doesn't become the long-term owner, will usually be the O&M contractor for it. And we're also a little unique to some other companies where we are currently developing it. We're also going to be the EPC contractor, pretty much regardless of who owns a project. So we'll permit a project and we'll build a project.
and does Revision continue to service the project even after it's sold?
On the projects that we don't own for the long term, we will very often be the service and maintenance contractor for it. So we'll stay with it in some capacity. This model, we would be, we'd be building it, we'd be the service company, and we'd be the administrator of that ownership structure.
So is this pretty big for Revision for being in Maine? I know you do big stuff in. further south.
Our largest projects are the 5 megawatt, 20-acre projects, which we have a couple of. This is now our
In
larger
Maine?
size. Yep, in Maine. The project sizes participating in the net energy billing program are largely dictated by that program, which is set by the legislature. So you kind of see through the state over the last 5 years, a huge amount of 5 megawatt projects, because that was the cap to access a certain piece of this program. Maybe 2 years ago, that was reduced to about 2 megawatts and has recently become 1 megawatt. Also, you have to go through the ISO New England approval process if you're above a megawatt, or if you've heard the term cluster study, transmission study, which is just an added level of complexity for a lot of projects. So at this size, it's a little bit not easier, but it's a slightly smoother process for interconnection, because you're only working on the distribution side directly with CMP, and you remove what has turned out to be like in this region, almost a 2-year study that is just wrapping up for the projects that participated in.
Alex, what's the shelf life of this whole project? How many years out do you see this lasting?
Yeah, so the lease is really structured around the expected life, which a lot of the parts are warranted to 25 years, but most of them with, maintenance and as things need to be replaced or repaired, it's believed to be very reasonable in that 35 to 40 year period, which is why the lease has the options on it. So I think there's every reason to believe it's at least 30 plus years.
What's the cost per kilowatt? I mean, is there any economy of scale when you're talking about when you're reducing, if they keep on reducing the megawatts you can produce, so you're down to 1 megawatt.
Yeah.
But the cost of going 2 megawatts or 5 or 10.
Yeah.
Got to be relatively less than keep on reducing 1 megawatt.
Yeah, good question. It's pretty site specific. It's really dependent on what your upgrade costs are with the utility. You can imagine if you have a fixed amount of upgrades, like regardless of your project size, you need to upgrade a certain amount of 3-phase or maybe have a substation upgrade. When you have fixed costs really at the utility level, and then your project starts getting size smaller, then that impacts it. But if your upgrades are scaling with your project size and all things else equal, then it kind of can be fairly fluid. So this project originally had eyes on being closer to 5 megawatts and has become smaller through the legislative requirements, as well as just waiting with CMP. And so at this project size, it works well for the lot, and it still works well for the value, I guess, that comes out of it. for both, Revision and the landowner.
Why have they reduced it? Why do they keep on reducing it to smaller and smaller sizes?
I think that would probably be a full conversation depending on what different legislators are both hearing in terms of, there was a boom on the larger projects, which I think it's a mix of kind of the public appetite for these projects, which candidly, they're over the past few years, it's a divisive type of development, and we do what we can to keep them largely out of the public view, because I know that that's the biggest concern of if people can see them. And so I think politically smaller is better in some districts, and then also just how the NEB rates are set is, the initial expansion of the program was largely around opening the door to renewable energy development in Maine. And I think that now that's just being walked back, but we'd like to see it open up maybe again in the future.
So we would need more information about exactly how far away you are from wetlands and the brook there. So, and also habitat, any sensitive animal habitat that's.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, we did send letters to all the state agencies as well as tribes in the early planning of the project. So there's no sensitive habitats from IFW, no sensitive botanicals from Natural Area Protection Group, no historical concern from MHPC, and no concerns from the major tribes. So those have all been sent down. And yeah, any of the final setbacks from property lines, roads, and natural resources will be provided in the formal application. And we're working with VHB Engineering out of Portland, so that'll all be within the plan set submitted. So it's underway now.
So the other big concern with the neighbors, last solar farm that went up was the construction vehicular, impact on the neighborhood. And so is the high school between you and Route 1?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so do you have, time of year that's construction's going on, what's going to happen to, the road, how that's all going to be handled is.
Yep. Good question.
Should be kind of
And
talked about.
I can talk broadly about it, and I'm just going to take a note because I'll connect with our operations team so I can bring more specific information into the application. Pending really the timing of the formal planning board process with the town. That's kind of the long lead permitting for this project with the DEP, the decommissioning permit, and it's a stormwater permit by rule only. So those are pretty low lifts. So I think it would be reasonable to say that work would be started this summer pending those approvals. And for a project of this size, I can get an idea of number of deliveries. That I think is probably the bulk of the traffic, which is just the deliveries of the racking, deliveries of the modules. And then once those things are on site, then it's really just crews of electricians.
So you're not
Installation.
contracting the removal of the trees and all that stuff. I mean, that's going to have an impact too.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it's fairly heavily wooded.
Yeah, the site civil work usually can occur within a couple of week period. I'm not sure how the concern, if it's more specific just to the immediate area, or if school traffic has a portion of your question too. So I'm just going to make some notes for it right now so I can speak to that in the formal application. But generally, construction is weekdays during normal working hours, so there shouldn't be anything too out of the ordinary for that. But I'm going to just make some notes.
School buses coming and going.
Yeah. I think if that schedule does hold where the majority of that work occurs during the summer, then by fall, it should be down to the smaller site crews that are really just electricians, just wiring, hanging modules and wiring. So the bulk of the deliveries and site work would be done hopefully during that summer period.
Any other questions from the board?
I got one question and I just gotta ask it.
Yeah.
Because we've gone through a few of these solar things.
Yep.
But the cost benefit analysis, do you have an engineer figure out how many good days, how many surface area you have? How do you come to that final number where you're getting more energy out of what you're taking all the materials and this, that versus to do it?
Mhm.
You see what I'm saying?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, our electrical engineering group uses modeling software that says, here you are on the earth, it predicts kind of the irradiance, the shading of your site, days of exposure, clipping for either shade or snow cover, and builds you a model to say, in this location for this size of output, here's the production that you can anticipate in, year one, and then year two through whatever, as the electrical gear becomes slightly less efficient. And then you can say, this is the kilowatt hour generation and assign values to that. So I'm not the financial person who does that, but yeah, that's the rough idea.
Thank you.
If there's no other questions from the board, are there comments from the citizens in the audience today?
Do you want me to quickly read the one that was submitted to the planning board?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Start with that.
So there was one resident, Linda, who just had three main questions. I spoke with her on the phone, and then I sent the email that you all have in front of you. Three main things she was curious about. One was the location of the access gate and whether it was close to the public road or further down closer to the solar farm itself.
Right now, we're planning to have the gate within the line of the fence, which is beyond the tree line of the road, of Manktown Road. So we're not planning an additional gate up in the field. Mostly because then there's just kind of a gate in the field. If that's something that the board requires in the end, sometimes they would, if it's a concern of people going down the access road, but otherwise it would be a double leaf gate at the fence line, which will be behind the tree line of that field between the tree line and Manktown Road. And that's where like the Knox box would be for the fire department. So
Max, what do you think her concern was about the location of the gate?
Overall, all 3 points that she raised were just concerns about aesthetic and scenic views. She has property totally across the street from it. And she just wants to be able to still see the views of Camden Hills from her place. So she was curious.
yeah, I think right now we are not planning gates or fences within the field. Pretty much for that reason. The landowners are also sensitive to minimizing what's going in that field to the access road and poles necessary to interconnect, and then underground and keep all the other infrastructure behind that tree line.
And that goes into the second point for the location of any above ground electrical poles. You already talked about the conduit. And I think you do have it marked here on the map. The new 30 pole, the primary metering is just a bit on the property right there, but still close to Manktown. I can.
Yep. Yeah. So the poles, there's, I think, maybe five poles.
Yeah, I have new utility.
Yep. And so we're doing what we can, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which includes the metering, the air brake switch, and then our air brake switch and a recloser. And then, so that's just the protective devices that CMP will require, and then it goes underground from there.
So
So-
this would be the first, the last thing by here.
Yep. Yeah, and we're doing what we can to keep those poles tucked between the access road and this tree line, which is going to remain, to try to keep everything tight to the trees and not have things floating in the middle of the field.
Did you say there'd be 5 of them? 5
Yep.
poles?
Yeah.
Huh. That's a lot of poles.
Yeah.
And it's required because you need to mount the equipment on those poles.
Yeah. So there's kind of a
Are
sets of
these,
like a standard telephone pole, yeah. Which is just the redundant kind of protective devices for CMP to fully isolate the project from the distribution system.
And then the third question she had was about the tree vegetative buffer that will surround the solar farm itself. She just wants to be sure it's still that sort of a nice buffered screened area so that, again, can't
Yep.
see the solar.
Yeah,
farm.
that will be shown, again, that'll be shown on the plan that's being developed right now with VHB. So it'll show all the limits of clearing as well as all the civil components. So yeah, the intent is to leave natural vegetation between the lowest edge of the field and the array, and then as well as maximizing it between the abutting lots along that same side of Minktown Road. So it'll be the thinnest where the field is, obviously, just because it's already cleared all the way down there. But that's where it'll still be left as much as possible. I think at least 50 to 75 feet is the goal for the thinnest areas, I guess you could say.
50 to what?
50 to 75. It could be more than that. So we will not be clearing to the edge of that field, though. I think that's the base of the question. If you want to forward me the email, I'm happy to respond to that.
Any other comments from the audience? Yeah.
Questions.
Yes.
What's the closest any of your other projects have been to a neighboring house?
I think the closest would be, I don't know off the top of my head, closer than this. This one, I think we're doing a pretty good job staying a pretty good distance away. We probably had projects within 100 feet of houses in other towns. Not one that I have personally worked on.
Any information on property value impacts?
It varies around. I've maybe read 2 papers on it. I think that you can imagine most of the papers, just due to, I guess, available data points, will bundle 1 megawatt plus up to 40, 50 megawatts. So this would be on the absolute lowest end of that. The bigger differences start to be seen, I think, in less rural areas with larger projects. And I think the couple that I've read, some shows 0 impact, some show 1.5% impact. And I haven't read any paper specific to Maine. So I'm not sure if those studies have been done. The closest I've heard, when I was at a planning board in Augusta, maybe a year or so ago, there's the large project on Route 3. There's the Four Corners with the gas station. You kind of see the back of the panels. And I think the assessor had done a project specific analysis there with no impact, but that's the closest I've heard to something in Maine. Usually it's up to an assessor to make a project specific or town based value assessment. So it's about as much as I know.
Yes, I also would like to know on what is the glare like off these panels?
Yep.
They're facing and stuff, because I've also read that can impact wildlife. For birds and different animals get confused by
Yep, good question. Yeah, the glare is usually not too big of a concern for these. Mostly you can imagine the modern solar module is really designed to absorb as much light as possible, and it doesn't create a lot of strong reflections. It's actually less reflective than house glass or surface water. We also do screening through like the FAA to see if they need any formal glare analysis or filings. This project doesn't exceed any of their criteria. Furthermore, because it's fixed tilt, it's always in one angle completely south, and there's no developments or residential properties or businesses directly due south of it where it would be facing, and obviously Minktown Road is sideways to it and up the road, so there's also will never be any traffic or anything looking directly at it.
How about animals? Like I'm thinking of small animals that could get inside the fencing and stuff and get trapped.
Yeah, with,
Care of that or?
with the agricultural style fence, it's actually designed to allow small animals in and out, so. Most of the projects, you know, you'll have field mice or whatever other groundhogs will burrow and live in there. So that's completely fine. They are encouraged to go in and out. And then the idea is to keep out, you know, deer and other large things. So if something were to find itself in there that didn't want to be in there, then I think we'd probably, like many other places, have to contact animal control or something. But the idea of that fence is to allow fairly free passage of small animals.
How about noise from it? Because we've got all the 5 poles, like you said, coming up through.
Yep.
And where the actual,
The equipment
the
pads.
equipment that transfer the GSA.
Yeah.
corners.
Yeah, the majority of noise on these solar projects, and again, there's no substation or batteries or anything like that. So it's really the modules, and then the inverters are the noise maker. I think the inverter pad is still several hundred feet from the nearest residential property. Up close, it sounds like a microwave. I think we'll file spec sheets as part of the application, or the inverters we're currently using are rated to about 60 decibels at 3 feet. And then that noise attenuates and will likely be completely inaudible at lot lines, but certainly I think I ran the math today and it's well below the sound thresholds for sure. So if you stand next to it, it sounds about like your microwave, and the further you get away, it's inaudible.
And that doesn't affect animals that you know of and stuff.
No. And at night, it's completely silent. It only operates during daylight hours. Obviously, if there's no sun, there's no generation and everything's off and quiet.
I'm sorry, I was a little late, but how about the disposal of the panels when it comes to time when they are taken out?
Yep, good question. Yeah, so the project is going to submit a decommissioning plan, which will detail the full removal of the system to both the town and the DEP. Candidly, all of these projects are in operation, and there's a little bit of, in the next 20 and 30 years, the development of what the recycling and disposal of the panels is going to look like. But the modules that we're using are, it's really a silicone based cell and tempered glass and aluminum. So there's no hazardous materials. It's doesn't classify as hazardous waste through like a TCLP testing. So in terms of the disposal, if you had to dispose of it today, the majority of the parts are recyclable, and the rest could be disposed of as non-hazardous waste if you had to do it today.
And any studies on carcinogens? Remittance from that?
Yeah, there's no like emitted materials into the air, nor are there, hazardous materials within these components. So I'm not aware of any potential carcinogens that could be linked to these materials.
Both of your names, please.
Carol Soderman, 498 Napetown. Thank you.
I'm also happy if either of you want to, I can give you my phone number and email address out in the lobby after I'm done. You can shoot me a note anytime if you'd like.
Yeah.
Seth Alvarez. I'm curious about the question that Eric asked that I didn't actually hear a coherent answer to, which is the implied or actually planned cost of the construction, the build, either on a per watt basis. So it's always in the industry, as you know, established. So I wanted to speak a little more directly to that, notwithstanding the variations in sizes from 1 to 5 megawatts and all the restrictions that the net metering puts on, just the cost you guys can build, what it would cost to go. And then more interestingly, perhaps for the town, I don't know, I'm interested in who the off-taker, what the off-taker model will be. You said residential solar, and we all are bombarded with these solicitations for subscription solar.
Mhm.
My experience with Revision in the past has been you didn't used to do subscription solar, you did share solar.
Yeah, yeah, it's this,
So could you describe the difference of those two for people, and then which one this is going to be?
yes, I will do my best for each of those. So the first one, for the cost, I don't know the construction costs off the top of my head. I think it's a component of the formal application, so that will be provided. You know, a megawatt project, it'll be on the scale of a few $1 million, not $20 million. So at a cost per watt, it's a few dollars a watt.
A couple dollars.
And then, yeah, so it's subscription based. I think the key is that you are accessing the value of the power without an ownership share in the system. In this model, the share based, you have the benefit of the power generation, and you also actually own a portion of the system. So I think that's the difference. It's a little bit more of not quite like and again, I'm not in the sales group, so in my shortcoming is in the details of the ownership.
So would you anticipate selling 50 shares or something like that? 50 ownership shares or 100 arbitrary number?
Yeah,
Just you would
so it's
advertise for it and
yeah, based on what the final system layout is, which gives us a final system production for every kilowatt hour of the modeled production. And I don't, you know, assign arbitrary X's to it. For every X number of kilowatt hours equals certain number of shares, and then that dictates how many shares the ownership of the system is.
so for example, if I had a house that consumed 10,000 watts or something on average, I might want to offset 100% of my electricity use through net metering.
Mhm.
And so I would buy 1% of this project, something like that.
Something.
Whatever the cost ends up being.
Something like that. And again, I don't sell the shares and I don't do the financing of the project so much. I work alongside them. But that's a layman's version. I hope that answered.
So it's very similar to rooftop solar, except you're not burdened with the roof work on your house.
Yeah, the majority of the shareholders of this style project are, you know, people like my house is not a good candidate for solar. I might be somebody who can access the benefits of clean energy with an ownership stake, and you can sell your share at any time, where you could not otherwise host or own your own system. You know.
Does Revision build into the financial modeling? And I know you're not the sales and financial. guy.
Yeah.
Might be interesting to have it in the final application.
We do have, yeah, we have an in-house finance team that kind of decides both where the projects are going to be sold to, how they're going to be sold and modeled. You know, a portion of that is probably, you know, something that they won't want to share too many specifics of how we do our financial modeling. So I will share what is required by the ordinance, which is around construction costs and what the ownership looks like. So we probably can't give too many details.
The reason I led with that question is often communities care about whether a vendor such as Revision would be interested in a project like this to give some low income access to low cost energy.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's required in large federal projects, much larger than this. And I was just curious if Revision had a habit program for doing that in place already that would probably participate in this to some greater or lesser extent of share ownership.
Yeah, it's a good question, which I'm going to make a note of because I just can't, I don't want to give you a poor answer tonight.
Thank you.
Any other comments on this?
I do have someone, Ruben Mahar, on the YouTube channel asking some questions. First question is just, will there be any data being run to this location or any need for high-speed internet to this location?
The project will have an internet connection, just because the data systems are essentially web-based and live, and that's how a lot of the preventative maintenance gets done. If there's any faults on the system, it's transmitted immediately. I'm not sure yet what the plan will be for that. We can either run a wire along Minktown Road to essentially bring it wired internet, or CMP will allow a wireless based internet now. So it will have web-based data systems, and I'm not sure what the final look of that will be.
The second question that he was asking regarding the vegetative buffer and for replanting, are you going to be using native plants, or do you have an idea of the type of species you're going to use for the replanting?
Yeah, I think in terms of after site
After construction's done and you're.
Yeah, I think the idea is that we'll be able to leave sufficient vegetative buffers to not need substantial replanting of like trees and bushes. The revegetation immediately after construction will be at the grass and low vegetation level. So in terms of that, it'll be like native friendly pollinator mix. It won't be, anything non-regional. So there's kind of a set list of approved seed mixes that are recommended and used. So I hope that answers the question.
And then this is more of a question for me. You mentioned the Knox box on there. Have you already spoken with the fire chief about that, or do you need some? Do you want me to get you the contact information from him?
Yeah. I was planning on reaching out to them prior to the formal submittal if they have any other questions. But I can connect with you after for an introduction, maybe.
Okay.
So those 5 poles coming off Minktown Road, are they connected with aerial wires? Is that also underground connections from point to point?
The poles it's like a standard aerial connection between the poles and then goes underground for the rest of the project.
So that makes me think that you're tucking them into the tree lines, not really gonna work that great.
I guess,
Can you come up with some plan for obscuring them somewhat as part of your plan?
trying to think of a way that could be done. I think apart from keeping them to the border of the field with the trees behind them, I don't think that they're.
And you have to do what above ground wire from pole to pole?
Yeah, just for that section of the project where it transitions from CMP to the private side where those protected
But they-
devices and meters are.
100 feet apart? I mean, how? I mean,
They
on the
they
plan,
can be
you're close.
they can be put about 30 or 40 feet apart for those devices. It's not like 150-foot span where you'd have your distribution on your road. So they'll be as tight together as CMP will allow us to do. But they are telephone poles, so I don't think that they can be fully obscured.
Yeah.
So keeping them the minimum setback from the tree canopies that CMP will allow to the edge of the field is what we're hoping is the best solution to keep them not directly in the middle of the field and as least intrusive as possible within the limits of that.
Yeah, you have another question?
Just point of reference, if you look at the North Novo Road, I think they're the exact same switch isolators are within about 100 feet of the road to the last pole in. And then there's one, because they didn't bury their lines all the way in with the array. And basically, it's all very tight up against the road, and it's only 50 feet from the trees. They're noticeable. They're all pretty compact.
Okay. There's no other comments on this.
Just one last question, with the kind of, how is the site overall monitored? Do you have cameras? How do you?
Monitored in terms of the,
Well, you have internet connection, you're saying, so it tells you when certain panel would go down or when there's a problem, but
Yep.
but do you monitor it literally, do you have a camera that monitors the system or the whole site to see whether there's any vandalism or what's going on there?
yeah, good question. So the monitoring, I guess sounds like there's two uses of monitoring, maybe. For the first part, just in terms of the system performance and our systems working. That's based on the kind of immediate feed web-based data acquisition system, which is being monitored by the service group. In terms of security monitoring, there's usually one camera that is at the gear pads, which is really just to make sure everything is in order right there. There's no, no like floodlights or security lights or extensive cameras around. We would hope that there is no vandalism. There are periodic, service and maintenance visits that are just doing spot checks around, and in most cases, people stay away from the projects. In cases where that isn't the case, then our service and maintenance team are working with local police departments to remedy. But I think we've only had one case on any project in Maine where that's been an issue, and it was much closer to a road, so somebody could throw rocks from outside of the fence. So that I don't think will be the case here.
Is the property owner nearby?
Yep. Hey, the property owner lives in the house just to the on Main Road. Just to the west of the project and to the south of that tree line, where the power would going. So that's his primary residence.
Okay. So they might be aware if anything's going on.
Any other questions or comments? Yep.
Are there any benefits to being a neighbor to one of the solar farms? It seems to be a potential list of negative that wasn't sure.
The benefits of, I guess the immediate one for, it's more of a general town benefit than the immediate abutter, is just the being able to access the reimbursement of tax program through the state. So the majority of the real property of the project is tax exempt, but the town can file for reimbursement on the value. So there are tax dollars coming back to the town. For an immediate abutter, I can't say, apart from you would be more than welcome to access a share of the project. But apart from that, it's like any private development, and I'm sorry to say. So to be honest with you, we're doing our best to mitigate any direct impact to your property and keep it as far as away. But other than that, we'll try to work with you best we can to mitigate any questions or concerns you have.
They have to hire somebody to mow. You've got a son who wants to mow.
We do. We will hire local mowing and local plowing, local contractors.
Anyone else?
Any safety concerns? Published or written as far as the residents in the area?
No, I mean, the main concern is obviously it's electric equipment, but the concerns are if you are handling or accessing the electric equipment. So there should be no reason for anybody to be within the limits of the fence. It's designed to keep people out. So apart from that, the concerns that people voice sometime are like electromagnetic fields. It's super limited. It's kind of the equivalent of household electric items. So really, really low levels immediately adjacent to it and non-detectable outside of the fence line. Other concerns, glare, noise. I hope I spoke to those. And otherwise it's steel and glass and wire. So no other health concerns, I don't think. But again, I'm happy to, the town has my email address. If you have other questions or want more specifics, you're welcome to maybe reach out to him and he can forward my email address or specific questions. I'm happy to speak to those. And I hope through the, during the formal application, I'll speak to the separate environmental and general performance standards more specifically. So hopefully that will help answer any other questions.
Is there a higher incidence of lightning strikes at these sites?
No, not that I'm aware of.
All right, if there's no other questions,
Thank you very much.
Thank
I'm,
you.
I'm happy to stand for 5 minutes in the outside if anybody does want my email address for the butters. So thanks very much.
Thanks.
And, anyone who's leaving and who hasn't done so yet, please make sure you sign into the sheet that's right at the desk, right before the door.
Yes.
sorry.
Okay, fine. Okay, awesome.
If you want, I can also put that up on the screen.
That'd be great, yeah.
Good evening, members of the board. How are we this evening? My name is Henry Hess, landscape architect with Sebago Technics. With me tonight is Mike Gagnon, Maine Health, representing the Maine Health team and the project at 126, 130 Depot Street here in Waldoboro. The property is the site of the former Fieldcrest Manor Retirement and Nursing Home, located in the Route 1 Commercial District B on map U9, lot 29. Project is proposing a 16,000 square foot medical office building. And as part of that project will be the improvements around that building, such as parking, arrival, drop-off sequence, the utilities associated with it, three-phase underground power running to the site, water, pump station to actually get effluent or any other waste back up to Depot Street. About, let's see, the project site will create a little over an acre of impervious. I think we're actually closer to about 2.5 impervious. So we'll be required to go to DEP as part of their stormwater general permit. You'll see in the lower section there, kind of on the southern side, there's a bit of a kidney bean shape to the south of the building. Well, it's not the final engineered size, and we've really only begun some preliminary studies in the grading and understanding the site. That is generally where the stormwater mitigation and BMPs will be located. The site itself is approximately 130 parking spaces. The arrival there, part of why this is 126 and 130 Depot Street. 126 is a very narrow neck of the property that then opens up to this larger parcel. And having 130 as a part of the parcel there actually really helps gain more comfortable access and pulls you away from the adjacent neighbors there, because it is quite tight. If we didn't have that adjacent parcel there to adjust the access, we'd be very tight. That existing access is right along the abutter there. So part of that is also including 130 to actually create a little bit more space and buffer against the abutter there. Generally, the site slopes down the Merrimack River. You'll see the extents here. We have recently collected, since our submission, delineated wetland data on site. The application itself is from the National Wetland Inventory, and we've actually found the wetlands to be further down the slope than what the National Wetland Inventory is showing. So there's a little less wetlands out there, but certainly the project in general will be looking to not impact any of the wetlands out there on site. So we will not be submitting any documentation to Army Corps of Engineers for that. Just really permitting through the town and municipal system here, as well as the state with the MDEP. The building itself is a medical office building, as I stated, mainly used for primary care. There's not really any emergency medical care services here at the building that'll be proposed, but mainly primary care. As part of the permitting, right now, we've kind of analyzed some of the preliminary traffic studies or traffic counts for the project, or well under the threshold for any sort of DOT permitting. So we'll certainly be working with the town as we get a little bit more traffic engineering involved and understand the major thresholds for the municipal side. we are certainly working closely with staff at the moment. It's been a large site selection process for this site. Looking at a number of sites in the town. And working closely with staff to find different sites around town that'll suit the programmatic needs for Maine Health, as well as future plans for potential buildings that the town may be able to locate on the site with Maine Health. As part of that is right now, it's not planned. We don't really have a building footprint. We have a general idea, but generally on the site plan, you see that white section up there. The goal is to kind of leave that as a remaining open lawn area, so future development by the town can happen there. But I know that's down the road at the moment, but they've just been working closely with staff and Max and folks to really understand kind of what their needs may be in the future, and when the town gets to that point and when we're moving towards that, we'll actually have the space available for it on site. And at that point, there'll certainly be a bit of a shared occupancy on the site. But with that, it's kind of the general overlay of the site and the programmatic needs there. Certainly yield my time back to the board and staff for any questions you may have.
I got a comment to make. In the spirit of full disclosure, I am an employee of Maine Health. So I don't know if that disqualifies me, but I think I can have an open mind. But I was just gonna ask you on the
They
site,
get motorcycle parking planned there.
so you're gonna see outpatients
Um,
at the building? Is that part of is it just office administrative or?
Mike, for programmatic stuff, I might turn that over to you for some of
Sure,
that.
the Primary care. So right now, existing in town here, Waldeboro, we have two primary care practices.
Right.
One affiliated with Lincoln Health, Miles Hospital, and one affiliated with Penn Bay.
I
So
see.
essentially, we're combining both of those primary care practices into one site.
And those sites will be eliminated, the other two?
Correct.
And just from my own experience at Miles, parking is just, I mean, a big problem. Particularly-
At Miles
Yeah,
in Damascus.
yes, sir.
Yes. Yeah,
So
I
I'm just
agree.
wondering if you're seeing outpatients, I mean, are you guys ready for that?
Yeah, I think the volume, which Henry, that correlates to the traffic studies and whatnot, we're pretty comfortable with the size, the access.
Yep. For parking, we're meeting that threshold in the ordinance for parking there. And typically with these types of buildings, you see about 4 to 5 per 1,000, 4 to 5 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet. So we're certainly a little bit over that, and part of that is actually trying to permit some of the parking that may be needed in the future for another
Well, that's
community
the
building.
big
So
thing, yeah.
we are a little bit over the threshold there, and trying to permit a little of that ahead of time. But
Yeah. I'm just gonna say that, you can plan for for whatever, but the parking is a big problem. I mean, for everybody.
What is that expansion area that you've got dashed in?
That's the potential for expansion, exactly that, out to about, I think it's at 16 now, it'd be about out to 18 potentially in the future. It's currently an option that we're discussing the programmatic portion of this project.
Would you have to change the parking because of that?
I think we'd still have enough parking if that were the case. If needs be, we would certainly be back in front of the board. If and when that addition happened, and trying to meet the ordinance requirements and having enough parking on site. At that time, we'd certainly have a good idea of what the parking needs and requirements would be after it'd be open and running. And if we had enough parking based on that current need, we may not, but to meet the ordinance requirements, we might need to add some parking.
So, couple of comments. If I lived in the neighborhood, I'd be like, it's very residential. It's already Route 1 is glowing down to one side of all the houses, and suddenly we have a commercial building. I mean, the nursing home used to glow. It hasn't been glowing for a number of years, but anyway, to have that presence in the back of everybody's houses is going to be an issue. So I would really hope that that lighting in the parking lot is super low, dark skies, planning and all that kind of stuff, and that this isn't a glowing commercial thing in the middle of basically it's a pretty that whole back area down to the river is unoccupied, and it's it would just be good neighborly to really have this toned down at night. if you can design that into the planning, and I'm assuming this is a one-story building, not a two-story building?
Correct. Yes, it's a one-story building and all lighting will certainly be dark sky compliant and photometric plans will be sent to the staff and to the town, ensuring there's no light trespass at the property lines. Understanding, of course, that light still can be seen from a distance, but the goal being that no, we're not effectively creating more light outside of the property. Their hours of operation, certainly kind of like that 9 to 5 operation. So, in the evenings, there'll certainly only be enough light for maybe safety in case somebody were to trespass or be in the area, but.
And are we going from, the first set of parking lots down? It looks like, you've got paths cutting through the parking lots. Are we going down in grade? Are those end up being steps or ramps, or is that kind of just showing a path, indicating a path?
That's a great question. Yeah, the whole site does slope down away from Depot Street. And looking at a couple different orientations of this particular footprint mixed with also where we could put a future building. The building kept kind of sliding down the hill. And so yeah, this is about 15, 20 feet down away from Depot Street. And right now we're anticipating the driveway to be about 6 to 7% down that first pass until you get down to the banks of parking, and then it levels out a bit. But yes, those would most likely be, 4, maybe 5 stairs in between those parking banks there. The goal of that really being to get that low enough so when we are in front of the building, we are level. We do provide that ADA access there across the drive line.
Right. And so this area that you generously left for the town, whatever happens with that, are you assuming that your parking lot becomes available for, that was it? I mean, who owns the parking lot?
No, that's a great
Over
question. I think the legalities of that will certainly, when the town does have a plan to kind of take that next step and we do suss out exactly how much parking. Right now, we're anticipating about 30 or 40 spaces for them, based on maybe about an 8,500 to 9,000 square foot building.
So that upper parking lot is
Exactly.
30 to 40?
Yeah, and so that's kind of the goal in leaving. You'll kind of see there's a larger gap in the parking banks there between that first bank and the second and third.
Yeah.
And that's kind of create a little separation there. And knowing that parking will hopefully one day be for the community building itself. But when we get into the nitty gritty of it and we have more of a program for that, the community building, we can certainly look at that parking arrangement and, who shares which parking, given especially the hours of operation that may be happening then.
And so I keep talking, sorry, if you guys want to say anything. That you indicated tree lines on the property side boundaries. You're adding buffer.
Yeah,
You're adding plantings.
the indication with that would be that we'd provide at least a buffer or screening of some sort. Like probably use evergreens trees as best we can, or at least a mix of evergreen and deciduous to create at least a full season of interest. Again, the building's going to be sitting quite low compared to the homes themselves. The homes will likely look down on them and over it. So the goal being that it doesn't really intrude the views down to the Metamucil there, but
But they're still looking at a parking lot.
they're still looking at parking.
So that'll be a concern when you come back.
Sure.
Anybody else?
I'm curious whether Ann, Orin and Ann are here tonight. Represent
Orion and they.
Orion, I mean.
No, that was actually the point that they wanted to submit this because they were unable to.
Okay. So, because in reading over their thoughts, I think that there's a lot of them are sort of really valid and I think it should be really considered. I mean, one of the things that they brought up is why the road access road is not on the north side of the property as opposed to the south side, coming in that way, because the south side one kind of goes right behind all the houses, and if we brought in from the north, then it wouldn't, it would avoid. And so even when people are leaving with their lights on in the winter, that you're not sweeping across the backs of those properties with the light, you're coming in from the other direction. And I think that's a really valid point. I don't know whether that could be redone so that you don't have that issue of cars coming out with their headlights pointing right into the backyards of these people, as opposed to coming up around the top. That building that building at the top that's on the north side, that right there, that's gonna be removed.
Yeah, that building is proposed to be removed.
Okay, because what they were saying is why not move the whole parking, the whole access road further to the north? Maybe where that house is, as opposed to on the south side where all the houses are, to keep it further away. I mean, the other point that they make, which I think is really valid, is, you know, having going up, I use Depot Street a lot to go to the dump. I mean, crossing Route 1 on Depot Street is a nightmare. And they make this point that, you know, turning left or right off, you know, right coming in from the north to the south, or on Route 1, or trying to make the turn out of off of Depot Street, you know, you could be sitting there for a long time. So if you have a lot of you know, cars going back and forth on Depot Street using this facility, I mean, there's always going to be traffic there. It's going to be lined up all the way up the block trying to make that turn. Sometimes you got to sit there for like 5 minutes before you can make that turn. So, I mean, I would think that the town would probably need to put a light there or something in order to accommodate people coming and going from this facility.
Do you want me to jump in on that?
Sure.
So that's something that I'm actually am trying to work with DOT about. Because it's dealing with Route 1, so we have to get the state involved in that.
And then I think they also bring up this issue around future public access. So is that what the intention here is, that people could come in, they could park here, and then they could take it, there would be a path down to the Dunk River?
Initially, yes, that is the goal there right now from permitting standpoint and getting the main health building in. It's going to be kind of a dead end there, and there'll be the availability and potentially a small trail there.
Mhm.
And I think really when that community building comes in is when that second half and the town will actually formally put more of a trail and maybe some access for whether it's boating or, you know, something like kayaking or something down there for the public.
So this site up here towards the road that you're referring to as community, a potential for a community building.
Mhm.
So that there's no potential for the medical center to expand there. That's going to just set aside for the community if they wanted to build something there.
Correct.
And
that-
the parking that's affiliated with that is what stuff that's in front there.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the big white space there toward closer to Depot is more geared towards potential community building.
So is this part of the approval process, Max, that whatever site plan gets approved, that fact, or is it a fact that space in front will become something and we're approving that at the same time, even though
No.
nothing's noted?
No, so this is strictly just the main health building, because as was just noted, that's if really the town wants to do it. We've certainly talked about it in the past. There has been one vote in 2020 to see if there was just interest in the town. It's always been talked about, but
What's it?
a community building,
A
a
community
building, or
center,
community center.
right? Whatever that is.
Yeah, but we also know what's going on right now with a lot of people. We just went through some revaluations and people are a bit mixed on taxes. And there was also the school bond that just happened recently. So we know some people probably are not too keen on jumping in on a building that we don't have too much information to share right now. So
Or what it is
Or what it
it,
could
is
be.
it a gathering space? Is it a sports thing or what, you know, I
Yeah.
don't think anyone knows
And-
anything about it.
right. And the problem has been, we can talk about a dream community center or rec center or whatever we want to call it all day,
Mhm.
but we don't have any land to get a footprint or an idea for it.
Mhm.
There was always the idea of putting it over at the Miller Ball Fields, but we found that the soils weren't really ideal for all this. So if the main health building's approved and they have this area designated for us, then we have a footprint we can work with at that point.
Could it be affordable housing?
That would, I mean, main health is leaving that for the town to decide for whatever we're gonna do with it.
Okay.
That's all I can really get at for where the town side is for this white area, but it has no
We're not
impact
making
on.
any decisions about that at this, with this application.
Right,
That's
because
to be developed.
there's no formal plans or anything for the town to do a community center. This is really Maine Health's property. It's their building that. I don't know if you said it, but what's the timeline for maybe construction, assuming?
The goal would certainly start construction towards the fall of 2024, so this year. Should permitting and everything line up the way we need it to. The longest lead time we believe is probably the Department of Environmental Protection.
You're responsible for taking the building down and all that stuff, right? That's part
The
of your deal.
demoing the existing building there.
That's sort of the point I'm raising with the community center. We don't even have architectural plans or anything, or even what the building would be called. So Maine Health, on the other hand, they have everything ready so they can start this year if they wanted to. Whereas they'll leave it for us, we may never use it. It's up to the town to decide.
So things like, what, I'm just thinking about what the impact of this kind of thing is for the town. There's labs and stuff like that does the town have to take care of garbage disposal and getting rid of stuff, and like, how does that impact other services in town?
I mean, until the town actually decides that they want to put something there, it's gonna be Maine Health's property, so, and that's all stuff they have to address in the application as well. Parking, trash disposal, water, sewer, everything's gonna have to address in the actual application itself.
Well, so it's good to remember too, is we have 2 existing practices already here in Walterboro, so they deal with trash removal, maintenance, all of that.
But they're not doing the labs in-house. I mean, that's kind of.
It's like a blood lab, take,
Toxic stuff, isn't it?
Medical waste, is that, yeah, I mean, that's all part of the Maine Health responsibilities.
Does the Depot Street sewer line have the capacity to absorb this?
We
Close the water line?
We're gonna be working closely with the sanitary district to make sure that we do have the capacity for that. And start sending out capacity letters that'll be part of the full application and included with sanitary district as well as the water. Making sure, again, we have the appropriate utilities and means to connect there.
And possibly a fire hydrant.
Likely with the
Artificial.
distance from Depot Street, there is a hydrant right at Depot Street. Again, working with the fire department, not only to understand fire turning radiuses as we come through the site. And making sure fire trucks can maneuver appropriately through there, but
But I mean, it's
Exactly.
part of being an asset to the neighborhood, like having I don't know if there are hydrants up and down that road.
there's a hydrant right at
Right
the
at the end,
current,
right
right next to the current access right
Yeah.
there. And then depending on what we work out with the fire department and the water district, they may require an additional hydrant closer to the building, just given the distance from Depot.
Okay.
I think Eric has a.
I just want to, what are we being asked to approve here tonight?
So this application is, and it's not even approval, this is just very similar to the solar farm. We're getting a presentation of what they're thinking of doing. The board's just asking questions and keep asking them to keep some things in mind. If there's some citizen comments, like the solar farm, it's just being raised. But this is all strictly the 16,000 square foot building that's on there. This community building that was mentioned, not involved at all. If the town does decide to put something there, the town has to get its own separate planning board process.
Does Maine Health have a veto over what is used in that area?
I leave that to whatever they decide to
Say-
do.
Say you wanted to put a trailer park in or something, Maine Health wouldn't go
I
for
would,
that,
I would
they?
certainly have to, I don't want to put words in Maine Health's mouth at the moment, but they would, anything that went there, again, the agreement with the land, I believe is already specifically understood that there is some agreement there with the land and the purchase and sale agreement, as well as nothing could go in that wouldn't be allowed per town zoning. So again, in understanding the relationship there certainly will be submitting what is the sale agreements for the land, and working with town staff to make sure that everything's legally done appropriately. And I don't think Maine Health would be willing to do anything beyond what they're doing for their programmatic building here. And the goal of consolidating their 2 uses in the town into one area.
And just as an overthought, people say, well, what does this do for the town? Does quite a bit. I mean, healthcare is out of whack. I mean, you need healthcare facilities
Mhm.
and people, instead of traveling. So I think it's a tremendous asset.
So there's a bit of a formality thing I should have addressed at the very beginning, because I think you all noticed Brendan decided to sit in the audience. He decided to recuse himself for this discussion.
Oh,
Johnny, you've mentioned earlier, if you didn't know might be an issue or not.
I did, I mean, I'm an employee of Maine Health, but I don't have any skin in the game other than being objective. But I will recuse myself if that's, if the board think that's appropriate.
I don't think it's necessary. I
That's
think
that's
if you're,
for
if
you
you're
and the board.
comfortable with it,
Oh, absolutely. I mean, again, I can look at something objectively. Not have any, like I said, there's nothing in it for me that I wouldn't say if I didn't work there.
so are any other questions from the board?
I just want to have one other question, which is if this space here that's been designated for public use is not used for public use, the Maine Health is precluded from using it for their use. That is to say, they can't come back and say, okay, we want to build another building there.
Be very
Yeah.
unlikely, and I can't speak to the exact legal agreement there because I don't have that formal document, but currently the goal is not to do that at all. I don't think there's anything that would preclude them other than their agreement in the sale of the property.
But you'll mow it.
The town will not be, in the interim, Maine Health owns the property.
Yeah.
So yes, maintenance and things like that will fall to Maine Health to take care of.
Okay.
It won't be falling to the town to maintain that strip there. It'll likely be an area that's left either kind of graded and flattened out to a gradual slope, and then reseeded with either some sort of bee pollinator mix or potentially a few plantings here and there, knowing that we probably wouldn't want to reforest it initially and then have to potentially either rip them up or take them away.
What, are you inclined to explore moving the entrance?
It's something we can certainly consider, and part of the reason is a great question. Part of the reason the entry is coming in the way it is it does provide a slightly longer entryway than a straight shot.
So
Which
it's
helps
less
us,
steep.
yep, it helps us reduce the grades there and provide shallower slopes for driving, access and things like that. We can certainly consider it and take a look at what it would do. And part of that also is trying to drive the building to a location at which we're not bringing lots and lots of fill. Trying to cut into the site to balance the cut and fill a little bit better than trucking in lots of fill.
I'm sorry, your reason for not wanting to put the driveway to the north where that house coming from where the house is, and then running the driveway to the north side, what was your reason?
The grade is steeper,
The,
so you get more.
The straight, so if we were coming in from the north, it'd be about a straight shot coming straight down. So it's a shorter distance, which actually makes your drive aisle a little steeper. So the goal in having something a little longer and coming down actually creates a little bit shallower slopes, something a little bit more manageable for drive aisles. We're looking at about, 6 to 7% for the drive aisle slopes. If we went straight shot, it might be closer to 10 or so. It's still manageable, but again, it drives the site elevations up a little bit with a shorter drive aisle.
So it almost follows the existing.
Yeah, we do try, and you can actually see, that's a great picture there. You can actually see how the existing site looks today with the building on it and how that drive aisle actually comes into the building. So we do kind of follow a lot of that existing pattern where the existing impervious areas are. Something we can certainly explore as part of the application.
Well, it may be better for you, but I'm not sure that's necessarily better for the neighbors.
Sure. I understand.
So I guess, Matt, should we open it up to the audience? Or do you have any other comments about our process?
Yeah, I mean, in the open up to the audience, Eric has already gone through the one that was done by Ryan and Ann. They're one of the abutters. I think I'm just quickly making sure you did go through everything. I think the only other thing was traffic volume and just seeing how that compares to previous uses. Because, yeah, Depot Street and Route 1 intersections. The only other question I had was, or questions, I guess, are from Ruben Mahar. One was, has the architect designed other Maine Health buildings? That's the first question.
Great question. So WBRC designed a couple of your buildings, I believe. Yeah,
Yeah.
they certainly have.
And then the second question, would Maine Health be able to add a second story if there was an identified need for it?
That's. It's not structurally gonna be, that's not. Very unlikely.
Yeah.
Because of, just structural design of it. Okay.
That's all I got.
Oh, so anybody have any questions in the? Of our guests?
My name is Conrad Winslow. I'm a recent resident of new resident of Waldeboro, and I'm an active, avid biker, pedestrian, user of trains when given the opportunity. And I'm a big supporter of this project because I think it offers a really powerful chance to shape the future development of not only the village of Waldeboro and the Route 1 area, but also access to the town. And I think creating demand for facilities like this at such a location so close to the train may actually drive a future need for a train station at just across the street, essentially. And this is a really unique opportunity to tie into the 2010 Waldeboro Visioning Report, the 2011 Bike Pedestrian Plan, and the 2011 Downtown Revitalization Master Plan documents, where ideas such as a river walk were suggested, which would involve more pedestrian and bike access alongside the river, and sidewalks along Route 1 and easier access from the village to Route 1 and so on. And I just want to consider the future development possibilities, not only of Maine Health, but of the community center in light of multimodal access, especially if there's going to be future access down to the river, which may or may not connect up with trails along the Potomac. And if the road did, and it is a de facto street, follow the north edge of the lot, and the buildings were placed next to that road on the north side, if they were oriented north-south, you could actually see the site as a street with buildings along the street. And if you did take the train and you were able to stop in Waldeboro and you just walked down the street, walked onto the site, you wouldn't have to go through 2 fields of parking. You would actually see a building and a street, and you could walk down the street and actually go to the river if you so chose. So for both aesthetic reasons and utilitarian reasons, there's a good case to be made for placing the access along the north side of the lot and lining up these buildings alongside that access and putting parking below to the south side of this building. Just something to consider at this stage if we're trying to think about the long-term vision of Waldeboro.
Thank you, Conrad. That's a great comment.
Is there presently a sidewalk on Depot Street?
I believe there is, at least on, I think it's on this property side,
I think,
the left side as you're looking at the map there.
yeah,
Other side, thank you. Correct me, thank you.
yeah,
Right side.
it cut short. I think there's about a 70-foot difference from the edge of the sidewalk to there. At least I thought. I'm not. I think that's what it is.
Roughly.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Seth?
I'm curious, in terms of the land use and the question of parking, it was always a big issue. How many, given the combined parking at your 2 existing facilities, my guesstimate is you have 50 or 60 parking spots, something like that. So this is supposed to double that. How does that correlate with your projected? I think it's 22 examining rooms and 45 staff and support rooms. The working population, is it about the same, or you're building this to grow compared to the existing to old facility?
That's a great question. I can turn a little bit over to Mike, and I know with this building, the goal in keeping it about 16,000 square feet is going to meet kind of the number of practitioners and the goals they're meeting for the practitioner numbers they're looking for to have in Waldeboro when you look at the combined sets of those buildings. With the goal being there is a small portion of expansion that if they should grow, it's shown on there, it's about another 2,000 square feet to the right side of that building or the bottom side. That they could potentially expand that building and grow a little bit.
And following the layout you've described there, you have planted with not only trees as opposed to shrubs, if I read my drawings correctly. do you really intend to make it, being a PT patient up at Penn Bay, which is this paved color scale with nothing, it's just the most ugliest place in the world. Is that intentionally what you're trying to do, or is that just schematically attractive for the board to think about? And how you think about committing to that kind of admittedly expensive landscaping to make it a more visibly, aesthetically pleasing place for not only the people there, also for urban heat island, if you want to pave it, and the neighbors.
That's a great question. The rendering itself is schematic in the sense that we may not place every single tree you're seeing there, and there's certainly going to be more than just trees on the site, shrubs, perennials, things like that, especially around the foundation of the buildings themselves, evergreen screening and buffering around the areas that we needed to help provide some screening. But the goal would certainly be to keep those landscape islands as they are there. And part of the intention of those landscape islands too is twofold, as you're saying, to help produce some of that heat island effect, provide an aesthetic that's not just a giant paved lot. And they also provide a means at which you can soak up some grade going down the hill and create flatter spaces at the bottom for ADA accessibility and things like that.
And I have a question for Max, if I can. Town has preliminary approval of a grant or something for federal funding, for partial federal funding for a site representative for some nominal to be determined community center. Quite a bit of money, $1 million. Is there any way that would apply to this? And is there any reason Maine Health would be interested in that to try to offset some of the development costs of this thing?
So the grant that Seth is speaking about was part of the fiscal year 2022 appropriations bill. That was when the federal government restarted the earmark process, and we just threw in a request on a long shot and we got it apparently. When we made that request, it was with the vision goal that the Maine Health facility and the Waldeboro Community Center would be located over at the Nordic Ball Fields. So that's why the request was for $1 million to help with site work. So utility expansions, parking, driveways, anything that would be shared between Maine Health and Waldeboro. So that $1 million was appropriated to us, but we don't officially have it at this time because we didn't get land to put it in. For this site specifically, if there's going to be this area left for a community center, the grant money can be used to help fund the parking and the driveway and the utility extension as well, if Maine Health would like to pursue that. And if the town manager and select board want to use the funds for that as well, since we do have to have a contract by 2025 to use the funds, and we have to spend the funds by 2030. So the question of community center will be coming up very soon as this goes forward as well. Because if there is this desire to do the community center sometime down the line, the funds may be used for this property. But again, that's going to be part of some environmental review, public hearing process that's going to be happening maybe in February.
I just wonder if it's big enough.
That's part of the discussion we have to have for the
Yeah.
community center.
Hard to say. I mean, and with
Or-
parking, it needs to be, available and all that. Anyway, yeah, that's another night. And are there other locations in mind presently for that to happen?
Unless you're about to give us a very generous donation of land, I don't think we do.
Okay. You never know. Doesn't hurt to ask. Okay, anybody else have any questions or concerns?
If you do turn the building and you do have the driveway come straight in. First of all, having the driveway come straight in, do you have an issue that it's steep? It's people flying in and stuff, or flying out for that matter. And given the grade. Can you turn it?
That's a great question. I didn't get into it thoroughly in the last response, and part of Conrad's question or his comments is we've certainly explored this site with multiple footprints and actually different orientations. Could certainly be able to provide some of that as part of the application if that's requested. With a long linear building such as this, the goal is really you want to straddle the contours and follow the contours.
Looking for a walkout basement.
And certainly, yeah, you end up with kind of a bottom floor basement and expanded footing to really make that happen when you turn the building down the hillside. So we've certainly explored that a little bit and found that the orientation of the building horizontally like this, or I guess vertically on the site as you're looking at it, but following the contours really does lend itself better to the grading of the site and accessibility to the site.
I got one question for you. Does the providers, when they're in the building, is there gonna be any limit on the amount of patients they can take? Because I think, I see as a reasonable person, that place is going to quickly become saturated with patients. So is there any way that you can curtail it, or do you just? You see what I'm saying? Because it's,
You're talking to capacity.
yeah, there you go.
So.
Yeah.
Roughly speaking, we've allocated, and what we try to do, you're combining two practices from two different hospitals, right? So they're very territorial right now. right?
Yes,
So we're trying to get away from, this is your side of the building and this is our side of the building and nobody mixes, right? So basic for, roughly speaking, there are two exam rooms for every provider, right? And there are, gosh, how many exam rooms? I can't remember.
Oh, I think
they said
earlier, I believe it's supposed to 27.
Yeah, so the real push was to get as many exam rooms as possible. There are some larger exam rooms, specialty rooms for OMT, osteopathic manipulation therapy. Those take both a little bit larger space than your regular exam room because the therapist has to move around the table while they manipulate what the doc does. So the proposed potential expansion would be to increase the capacity of the exam rooms for that.
Somewhere around 24 exam rooms.
Yeah. So it's an increase in capacity. If we take two practices individually, sure.
Are you gonna serve coffee? Is there be a coffee spot right in the front door?
We
I don't know what all this, looks like.
Yeah, the
public
current
spaces.
iteration, if you go in the main entrance there, you'd see to the right, there's a conference room. So that's designed right now to be able to have public access after hours in the event that, the evolution of a relationship lends itself to that. And then there's also access control doors for the staff to use it during the day as a meeting with the conference room. There's also a little area for food pantry. People could come in, they don't have to go all the way into the building to get their food, or they can grab it on the way out. Both of these practices have a small food pantry in each of them. So, coffee,
I'll hold you to it. So ambulance services happen out of the town office, right? Is that where ambulance is? So there wouldn't be a need for,
Yeah, this wouldn't be an emergency care facility. As there would be ambulances going.
it's not a quick care, it's not.
hey, Seth?
I was curious, if we as a region have a long and arguably tortured relationship with providing Head Start facilities, and I know they care is deeply invested in pediatric and young care. Given your current thinking, and I'm looking at you because probably you're the more strategic person as opposed to the operation. Is there any possibility to think about somehow on this relatively large site? And maybe the town get involved in this too. Finally incorporating next to a medical facility, a Head Start facility, which I know MCAS is still looking for, and that's it goes community action. Is that something that ever occurs or has conversations within Maine Health?
Within and between the town of Waldeboro, I mean, we've had, you know, in trying to explore how this partnership will work. We've asked those questions, you know, how big, what's the use? You know, what would you use a community center? You could, would it be a head start, you know, maybe a Head Start program in there or not? And that's as far, I mean, there's been dialogue around it. Max, I don't know if you want to speak to what potential use for the community center might be, or
Well, yeah, and that goes back to the point I raised earlier, that it's a conversation we have to have. And that's what's gonna be coming down a bit down when we talk about. If the town does want a community center there, what do we want there? Because we are aware that Head Start, you know, they are gonna move into 22 Depot Street. That's a good temporary spot until they can get a more a bigger facility to have more programs available, more slots available. But, you know, is that something that the town does want to see? Even if it's not a community center, but maybe just the place the Head Start could be, and it's just a Head Start only building, and the town wipes its hands with that. That's all stuff we have to talk about. So the question of childcare, I guess it's a matter of, is it gonna go in the building? And if it doesn't sound like that's the case, so could be in that spot.
Just for clarification, I was more asking a conceptual question about how Maine Health thinks about Head Start and cooperative ventures on campuses.
yeah,
Including this one, but maybe not.
I'm an engineer.
Okay.
You're welcome, thank you.
Okay, we're talking about something that isn't on the plans. We should probably wrap this up. Anybody else specifically to the Maine Health project? Okay, anything else you wanna, that you might have?
I believe
Correct.
we've covered everything. I really appreciate not only the board's
So it
question and
sounds like
time.
you're coming back fairly quickly if you're thinking you're gonna break ground in the summer.
Yeah, I'd love to be, well, it'll likely be closer to fall really breaking ground,
Yeah,
formally
I
for it.
just
Yeah,
want to be clear about
Yeah.
what breaking ground means, right? Because there's some abatement that needs to take place at the nursing home. That's about 6 weeks worth of work. And then there's demolition and removal. So there's a fair amount of work, site work that needs to take place before we technically break ground, right? So you're likely to see that activity sooner rather than later.
but yeah, I certainly appreciate the board's time and questions and questions from the public and the town here. Appreciate the conversation before we bring a full application forward. Thank you.
Thank you. So what do we forget to ask? Brendan?
Not much to review. Yeah,
Exactly.
interesting project.
All right. What are we doing?
Oh, I don't know, you're running this meeting.
No, you're over to you, buddy.
Get back at the table, Brendan, your back is the chair.
Next up is meeting minutes.
When's the last time we looked at November 9th? So there's one more typo in your thing, and so it's not a biggie. It says habit, not habitat.
Oh.
Didn't pass this spell check test. On Article 8, somewhere there, sorry. Didn't get it to you? Yeah, November 9th. Reading.
I don't have a copy of them with me.
Why didn't we do them in December? November 9th.
We ran out
We
of
had a
time.
3-hour meeting.
How much was their meeting?
3 hours and 5 minutes.
Is why I'll probably stick with this format of only limiting planning board meetings to 2 applications total.
Um. Has everybody read these minutes? Are they-
God with the wind. Was there a way to make that more concise? Beck did a really thorough job, but it was, huh?
It's repetitive.
There can always be references to documents as well that. That's just an option. I think Susan had something where rather than going through the entire checklist, she just said. Refer to the checklist attached to these. minutes."
Anyway, I don't remember November 9th. I can't vote on it and, other than that little typo change, I don't, the last one seemed fine. So I make an amendment that we, bring proposal that we vote on December 14th. Did you guys have a chance to read it? You're okay with it?
Yeah, I did. I have one question about this question that came up about this lot, this 30-acre lot that was set aside.
Yeah.
And you were gonna look at that because it's not really clear whether that lot. It says here that that lot wasn't gonna be.
So it's similar to the 2-lot subdivision that we reviewed right afterwards, where it's actually not gonna go to. The applicant, it's gonna be sold off separately to someone else, so it's actually exempt under state law for.
The 30-acre lot.
The 30-acre lot.
So then it doesn't fall under the 5-year rule. Then.
No, if
It
that
does.
30-acre lot splits within a 5-year period, then it does have to come back for subdivision review, but as a 2-lot subdivision. And after 5 years, they could split it once without the subdivision review.
Right, so, all right. Okay.
I love spam.
They could split it once into 10 lots.
Uh,
When you say once.
Well, no, the 30-acre lot.
Yeah.
That's the
After
the
5
blueberries.
years.
After 5 years, they can split that 30-acre lot into 2 lots just once. They can't do a 10-lot thing.
Why, why does it have?
It doesn't have, because the state is very, very interesting when it comes to its subdivision rules. So this 30-acre lot that we're talking about. It will be sold off separate, and so it's some weird preempt thing. And that's why we had that 2-lot subdivision too. They sold off 50 acres before they did the second split, so it's exempt. So this 30-acre lot. If that is split sometime between next month, because that's when they're planning on doing the final plan, that 30 acres is going to be split sometime between next month to 5 years in the future. It does need to come before the planning board for a subdivision review as a 2-lot subdivision. But after that 5th year, they can split it into 2 lots again, and it doesn't have to do subdivision review. But same thing, if it splits into 3 lots, then it does do subdivision.
So it doesn't matter what size the property is.
No.
It could be 200 acres, but they could only just split it into 2 lots.
Correct.
It's crazy.
That's everything in the town in general. Like I get people calling me all the time. Oh, do I have to do this and that to split my lot into 2? And I say, was it split until the last 5 years? No. All right, just file the deed work and we're good.
I bring it up because the way that the minutes are written here, it's a little vague as to what was decided
But
about
Lex
that
was gonna
issue.
check, so.
Yeah,
that wasn't
that's what I
decided
did
yet at
check.
that point.
So yeah, that whole bit was about how there was confusion around it, but I was gonna check it
Right.
before the final plan.
Okay, as long as it,
Yeah, I know. It's what are we documenting there?
I'll move to accept the December minutes. As is, or with the typo change. That Barbara brought up.
Did you find it?
Thank you.
Okay. I say aye. If all those that approve. Let's go, let's
I was
get out
waiting
of
for
here.
someone to second. I'll,
I thought we already did that.
Yeah. Well, I think Barbara initially did do the motion and then we got sidetracked, so Brennan, let's just say Brennan does the motion, Barbara seconded.
Okay.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
right.
Motion passes.
So November, should we? Just kick that to the next meeting. No, it's,
Well, these guys weren't here in November, so they're out.
Oh, that's
So we
right.
need us three, and are we enough to do, how do we do that?
Yeah, because it's still a 5-member board. And then Richard is an alternate member, so it's still 3 as a majority.
Do you remember it, Johnny?
I think did we get these, I think I read those minutes.
Why don't we wait?
Perfect.
Let's wait.
I think,
That was a very.
Super convincing.
look, when you get my age, that kind of
Sales
thing
pitch right there.
happens, okay?
So,
I read them all the time.
All right. I believe that is everything for tonight. I'll move to adjourn this meeting if there's
Just a
nothing
quick
else.
thing, actually, if you don't mind. I'm
Sure.
sorry. We got 10 minutes before 8, so I got some time to talk. I do want to make a quick request. I know I'm doing this again, but I'm actually going to be hosting a workshop next month on February 8th. So I already do have at least the final site plan for the 10-lot subdivision. He's confirmed he's going to come before. And I've told the people at 110 Robinson Road, they really shouldn't think about coming before the planning board unless they present their stormwater and soil erosion. They say they will get it done by then, but they have until January 30th. So I was curious if the board would consider potentially moving the date to something else unless you want to go with the planning board meeting on February 8th without me here.
I'm out of town the following week.
I'm in South Carolina that week.
I'm away up until the 16th.
So actually, hold on, just a quick poll. Who here could actually be here on February 8th? It's 3 of us.
Yeah, I'd have to drive 12 hours.
So,
When are you available, Johnny?
I can't, I don't know how to do.
yeah,
It's sad, but I.
But-
When are you available, Johnny?
I would be available the 15th, that would be the next Thursday after that,
22nd?
or the 20, yeah, whatever. I just, like I said, I gotta drive back, so. And I would prefer, Max, that you be at the meeting in this type of scenario, because stuff comes up, I think, that needs your attention. To say the least.
right?
I'm going from the 13th to the 20th. I could do the 22nd.
22nd. No,
22nd.
yeah, yeah, Roger that.
I'll make sure that's posted on the website and hopefully there's no conflict. Now I'm done. Okay.
All right.
We're 8 o'clock.
The only thing I can.
So, yeah, motion